Svidler for Chess24, and yet another video dedicated to the games of Mikhail Tal. In this video I chose yet another reasonably famous game of Tal's, the game he won in the Varna Olympiad of 1962. He won a game against Hehct, a game of, from a certain point on, exceptional beauty, but still I think it is very much in line with the games against Portish and Botvinnik, in that from a certain point onwards it appears as if Tal's opponents felt absolutely compelled to do what he wanted them to do. In this game, as to a degree certainly in both games, in the game Tal-Portish and in the Botvinnik-Tal game from the 1960 match, it begins looking as if what is happening on the board absolutely has to happen. There is no way the game can develop in any other way, and it applies to this game as well. Let me show you what I mean. Tal played both e4 and d4 with reasonably level frequency, and in this game he chose d4, knight f6, c4, e6, knight f3, b6, knight c3. After flirting with the Queen's Indian, the game returns back to the Nimza, and after bishop g5, bishop b7. The following moves are reasonably well known, and after knight d2, e5, f3, queen e7, e4, knight d7, bishop d3, knight f8, you get a position which Tal himself in his annotation said that he felt that knight f8 was perhaps not strictly necessary, and black could play g5, which has been played, I think, by Keres previously. And after knight f8, he points out that he had an opportunity here to play queen a4 check, which is a reasonably decent move. And also, of course, the most obvious continuation for white here is knight f1, knight g6, bishop f2, knight f4, and knight e3, transferring the knight from d2 to the objectively by far the best square for this piece in these Nimza structures, which is e3. From here, the knight protects the c4 pawn and will go to either d5 and f5 later on if the opportunity arises. And Tal, of course, had known all this, and he considered all those moves. But then he became very, very interested by a possibility which only appears on the board at this very moment, because right now the knight vacated the d7 square, and the pin along the h4, d8 diagonal is still in place. So at this very moment, it's possible to play c4, c5 and destabilize the position greatly. And after considering for a while, Tal indeed does that, and the game veers quite drastically off the standard positional course. Black can't really ignore this, so he has to recapture somehow. If he takes with the b pawn, white can, for instance, play d4, d5, and then give some kind of a check either from a4 or from d5, perhaps depriving black of castling rights, and then he will have a lot of play along the b file. So there's a lot of positional compensation here. The move Hehct chose, which is d takes c5, is more natural. And after this, Tal played d takes c5, queen takes c5, and queen a4 check. And as he himself points out, in this position, black had very valid alternatives to the moves, to the move Hehct actually chose. And when I got to this point, once again, I don't want to be overly critical of black's play in this game, but it is very, very hard for me to figure out what could possess a player of Hecht's quality, and he was a very, very decent player, to play c7, c6 here, because it's a move which immediately makes black's position so much more dangerous. The bishop on b7 becomes a useless piece of wood, and the d6 square, which quite clearly will become the target of the knight on d2, becomes very, very weak. And generally speaking, it's just such a strange move to make when black has a very natural choice between both knight 8, d7, and now the fact that the pawn on c3 is hanging kind of prevents white from developing any immediate initiative, and after, let's say, queen c2, black can play knight d5, attacking the c3 pawn again. And it seems to me as if, well, only black can be better here. And the same applies to knight 6, d7, which Tal mentions in his book and says he was planning to play queen c2, but after knight g6, well, white has his work cut out for him trying to prove that he has more than just some kind of compensation. I think black is just perfectly fine here. But as I said, instead of all this, Hehct plays c6 here. And now play becomes very, very forced, and Tal begins fitting completely in his element, as you will see. Castles. The move Hehct chose, knight g6, is fine, but he could also start with queen takes c3, and after bishop a6, black has b5, bishop b5, cb5, queen b5, knight 8, d7, queen takes b7, and in this position there's a choice between castling immediately, which leads to an almost equal position, and perhaps an even more forcing way to equalize. Rook b8, queen a7, queen takes d2, e5, and now castles. Rook b2 is also possible, but I like castles better. ef6, one final Zwischenzug, rook a8, queen b7, and now knight takes f6. And if white takes on f6, the spoiled pawn structure will not matter all that much because there's so little material left on the board, and I think the game will end in a draw soon after. So queen takes c3 was very much a possibility here, but knight g6 is not a mistake by any stretch. It's still fine. After knight c4, once again queen takes c3 transposes to the positions that could arise from the immediate queen takes c3. Because I only mentioned bishop a6 after queen takes c3, a stronger move here for white is knight c4, to which black has to reply knight g6. And in this position, black has to be careful. For instance, after bishop takes f6, taking with the queen is a big mistake, because e5, queen e7, check on d6, king f8, and f4 leads to a huge advantage for white. Despite black being 2 pawns up, his pieces are so ugly and so misplaced that white's attack just rolls on. But black can take with the g pawn, and after knight d6, check king e7, let's say knight f5, check king f8. The fact that white has to spend the tempo defending the bishop on d3 means that black will be in time to play knight e7 and either trade off or drive away the beauty, the knight on f5. And black seems to be hanging on here. And the same applies to the position after knight d6 check, king f8, and let's say bishop takes f6, queen takes d3, knight takes b7, gf, queen takes c6, and king g7. And although, of course, after knight d6, white has a lot of compensation for the pawn, it would appear to me that black should be okay after, let's say, the possible knight e5 here. But Hehct chose knight g6, knight c4, and here he didn't take on c3, which, as I said, transposes to the variations I've just shown you, but he went queen e6. In fact, even in this position, he had an additional option which goes unmentioned in let's say, the Tal book. He could play queen e7. Now, white pretty much has to play e5, because bishop g3, b5 is just losing. Knight d6, queen takes d6. Queen e7, e5, and now black can take on h4. If knight d6 check, king f8, this position is very similar to the one I will show you in a moment, but there white would play rook a, e1, and then collect material, and white would be better. But with the queen on e7, this doesn't work, because black can play, for instance, knight d5, and in order to win back the piece, white has to trade off his fantastic knight on d6, which is not something he would very much like to do. Therefore, white has to take on f6 after knight h4. Queen takes f6, rook a, e1 check. And in this position, the king runs not towards the king side, where there's really no safe haven, and after king f8, knight e5, black's position is incredibly dangerous and maybe just simply bad. The king runs in the opposite direction. It runs to d8 and then c7. And it seems to me that black is fine here. One possible variation is knight e5, king c7, queen g4, rook a d8. And here white has nothing better than queen g3, king c8, queen h3 check. And black has to play king c7. And after queen g3, the game will end in a draw. So queen e7, I think objectively is maybe slightly better than queen e6. But it's very difficult to put the queen on e7 under all kinds of pins, and it seems that queen e6 is just so much more attractive, and this is what Hehct played. But here Tal's genius shows itself in its full glory. He goes e5. As I said, here knight takes h4, knight d6 check, king f8 and rook a e1 is quite bad for black, because white will just regain his material and will continue the attack. So b5 is quite forced. And in this position, objectively speaking, strangely enough, I think maybe queen b3, the move that once again goes unmentioned in annotations, because who wants to make a move like this when you can leave the queen unprised? But from a purely objective standpoint, I think queen b3 is very, very strong. And after knight takes h4, king knight d6 check, king f8, takes, knight b7, and both knight d7, bishop e4, and knight d5, knight takes c5. I quite like white in this endgame. I wouldn't go as far as to say that white is much better, but white is definitely pressing. Whereas after ef6, it seems to me that the objective outcome should be a draw. But it's almost impossible not to make this this move at the board. As usual, I keep on returning to this theme. I think I know this about myself as well, and I'm not trying to compare myself to Tal all that much, but nonetheless, I know this feeling of finding a certain idea at the board and thinking that it doesn't really matter very much what the objective assessment of the idea is. Well, unless it loses in one move, but if it doesn't lose in one move, it really doesn't matter if it's the best move in the position objectively, and whether it leads to anything particularly good for you. You just think that this is something you absolutely must play. And I've encountered this numerous times over the course of my career, and I think it was an incredibly strong motivator with Tal as well. He just and in this game, I think most people would play f6, but I think in general, if he saw something which he liked the look of, he almost inevitably would play it, because he felt that he just has to. Anyway, ef6, b takes a4. If black sort of tries to keep up with white and goes castles, leaving all of those white pieces unprised, Tal in his book says that he was planning to go rook a1, which in fact is slightly wrong, because after queen e1, rook e1, ba4, bishop g7, fg7, rook e7. Tal says correctly that rook f7, knight d6 loses here, but in fact after a very strong move g5, rook g7, king h8, it seems that the game will end in a draw. But actually after castles, white can play queen c2 straight away without including rook a1, and after knight takes h4 and knight a5, black is in a lot of trouble, because his pieces are completely discoordinated and he's only one pawn up. So here white is quite hugely better. And as usual, and this is also I think a recurring theme, Tal would occasionally make mistakes and in long and perhaps not entirely forcing variations, but his general evaluation of what's going on the board was pretty much always spot on. Anyway, b takes a4, fg7, rook g8, this is forced. And here Tal made a move which is exceptionally beautiful to the eye, and once again, pretty much impossible not to make. But when analyzing this position before making this video, I spotted something else. And in terms of variations which appear afterwards, bishop takes g6 is perhaps even more beautiful than bishop f5. But as anyone who has ever done some kind of study solving in his life knows that a combination must start with a quiet move. So from a purely aesthetical point of view, in this position, if you have a choice between bishop f5 and bishop takes g6, and you know that they are similar in strength, there's absolutely no way you will play bishop takes g6. But let me show you why I like it so much. Bishop g6 absolutely forces fg6. There are no other moves. Rook e1. Once again, bishop c8 is strictly necessary. Knight d6 check, king d7. And in this position, not the prosaic rook e6, king e6, bishop g3, to which black replies king f6, rook e1, and now g6, g5, bishop e5, king g6. And I think the game will most likely end in a draw, because black will at some point return the exchange and equalize. But a move, I think, of quite stunning beauty here, knight d6, e4. White has one piece for the queen, and he blocks the file along which he could just recapture the queen and does something else altogether. Unfortunately, white is not winning here, and the game can end in a draw after two moves, which kind of spoils the impression. It would be better if black has had absolutely the only move in this position as well, but both queen f7 and queen c4 hold, and I'll show you the position which can appear after queen c4. Knight f6 check. Rook e d1 check also draws, but knight f6 check is, I think, more remarkable. King c7, knight e8 check. Black's moves are forced. Knight b6, king b6, bishop d8 check, king a6, knight c7 check, king a5. And here, the bishop on d8 is unfortunately hanging, so you cannot take on a8, and you have to go knight e8 check back, king a6, and this is, I think, quite a remarkable perpetual on a6 and a5 squares on a board where I think this landscape is very much worth noting. You won't see a position like this every day. But as I said, having seen bishop f5, it's impossible not to make this move on the board. And this is what Tal played. And in this position, Hehct is faced with a somewhat unpleasant choice. Clearly, queen takes f5 is wrong, because knight d6, king d7, knight f5, knight h4, and rook a d1 is quite crushing. White is almost winning here. Queen takes c4 simply allows mate, rook e1, queen e6, and after the following forced sequence, rook d1, king c7, bishop g3, black can either allow mate on the same a5, a6 squares, or play king c8, and now after bishop f7, white collects a boatload of material. The remaining two moves are knight takes h4, which is what Hehct played in the game, and a move which once again went unnoticed in Tal's original annotations, but which in fact I believe is the strongest in the position. In this position, black can play bishop a6, which is a very nice response. The bishop vacates the b7 square, where it's constantly under some kind of a fork. It pins the knight on c4, so when the knight leaves, the rook on f1 will be hanging. And after the pretty much forced continuation, takes, check, king d7, knight e4. Luckily for white, this move exists, because otherwise perhaps black would even be better. Now knight takes h4, knight takes c5, loses the bishop on a6 yet again, so black has to take on f1, knight f6. And now, for instance, king c7, bishop g3 check. Bishop is just in time to get from under the attack. e5, knight g8, rook g8, takes, rook takes g7. And, well, black's pawn structure does not really inspire much confidence, but he has a lot of it. And in the time that white needs to collect at least some of these pawns, black will be able to make some advances of his own. For instance, the game can continue rook e1, king d6, rook e4, rook b7, rook takes a4, and let's say h6, h5. And in a position like this, a supremely active rook on b7, I think, more than compensates for the structural deficiencies, and the most likely outcome is a draw. But instead of this, Hehct started with knight takes h4, and only after bishop takes e6 did he play bishop a6. And this runs into knight d6 check, king e7, and bishop c4. And white successfully unties himself. Rook takes g7, g3, and black finds himself in a reasonably unpleasant endgame. Once again, he's a pawn up, but his pawns are, as we already discussed, are really, really horrible. And also, compared to the previous position, there are two pairs on the rooks on the board, which means that white in many cases will be able to mount a direct attack against a somewhat exposed black king, and also he has no active pieces to speak of. I'm sorry. So the position is quite difficult to hold. Tal himself opined that it was better to trade off the bishops, but I think the position arising after rook e4 is quite unpleasant for black. Perhaps it's possible to hold this, but it's not going to be much fun. Hehct chose knight king takes d6, and after bishop a6, once again I think it was better to immediately assume the b file here and try to create some counterplay along the b file. But after knight f5, rook a b1, f6, Tal gave a couple of checks and then went king f2. This is a very, very unpleasant position for black because the knight on f5 really has nowhere to go, and the king on d6 feels incredibly exposed, as I said. And black eventually lost this position, even though he had drawing chances even here. I don't really think we need to follow the technical phase. I suspect Hehct was in a quite serious time trouble by now, and he didn't really play the remaining part of the game particularly well. But the first part, as I said, is exceptionally beautiful, and also analyzing these games with a computer, you find a lot of inaccuracies, or in some cases perhaps you could even call them mistakes, and perhaps you could form an impression that I'm criticizing both Tal and his opponents, and that my general approach to this is I'm showing you these games to show you how badly people played in those years and how error-laden these games are. This is very, very far from the truth. This is not my intention at all. I am showing you the improvements which were possible over the courses of these games because, well, to not do that would be lying, but I am incredibly impressed by Tal's readiness to go for double-edged, strange positions, which in many cases are not advantageous for him at all. But I don't think it ever bothered him very much what the objective evaluation was. And his desire to create something worth rewatching, I think it drove him very much, this desire to not just play well and not just win games, but to create something which would leave a lasting impression. And without this, we would be left, without this feeling of his, we would be left bereft of many things we very much enjoy about chess, and I think his contribution to the historic beauty of our game is absolutely exceptional. So this is not a critique. I am pointing out where I can the objective evaluations of the things he has done, but I very, very much admire the spirit in which he did those things, and I think when all of us, and I know this to be true of myself, when this spirit, and I'm not the best example of this, and it doesn't happen very often, but when I play in this spirit, I play my best chess, and I sometimes create something which I'm proud of. And this quality attracts me very, very much in Tal's games as well.